Before this video begins, I would like to give a quick thank you to my Asban team level patrons Fallon Cortez and Nathan Gibson. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Hello everybody and welcome to a bit of a different video to what I usually make. I've always enjoyed Iceberg charts delving into the absolute deepest depths of events, fanbases and media properties. The Iceberg format traditionally begins with the most well-known surface level information that even outsiders tend to know, before descending in a tier format with things growing more obscure and weird the further down you go, resembling how the visual part of real icebergs are only a fraction of the actual thing. The Iceberg chart is a hugely popular type of internet image and has been used for most major properties already, but I feel like the piece of media most deserving of an iceberg is Doctor Who, a show that has existed for over 60 years with all sorts of spin-offs, rabbit holes and oddities lurking underneath the surface. I know there have been a few attempts at making a Doctor Who iceberg before, most notably Beware's massive video and notorious CG series of videos, but those were over like 2 years ago, and I feel like there's now so much more to talk about. The iceberg is also just deeper and more complex than those videos have shown, so I decided to tackle it myself. Initially I had my eye on the fantastic icebergs created by SmappysIsland and F-Zilla. These are really good, detailed icebergs I highly recommend checking out, but in the end I decided to use AphexCubed's absolutely incredible iceberg with over 2,500 entries covering some of the most wild and interesting parts of Doctor Who's complicated history. For full disclosure and credit, I am working directly with AphexCubed to make sure this process is as accurate as possible, so please go check the iceberg out at the URL down below because they have put so much work into researching and making the iceberg, along with helping me understand a lot of the deeper entries. As AphexCubed explains, the Doctor Who iceberg is grouped based on obscurity, availability, accessibility and lore contribution, focusing on the modern show first, then the classic era, before eventually tackling the many pieces of expanded media stories. For both time reasons and watchability, I'll just be giving a basic summary covering the important aspects of each entry, kind of like an introduction to it. Since it's such a big iceberg, I'll be tackling it one tier at a time, before hopefully compiling it into one single big video when it's all done. So please be sure to support this series and the channel as a whole as we embark on this huge and potentially foolish journey together. So with all of that out of the way, let's begin our descent down the definitive Doctor Who iceberg. The obvious place to start with the Doctor Who iceberg is with the Doctor himself. The Doctor, often referred to as Doctor Who, is the lead character of the show, an alien time traveller who has been played by multiple different actors over the last 60 years. The so-called incarnations are traditionally numbered 1 to 15 as of this video, although there have been other official incarnations separate from this numbering system. The original run of the show featured the 1st to 7th Doctors, the 8th Doctor appeared in a TV movie, and the modern run of the show has focused on the 9th incarnation onwards. I'll get into the how and why later, but that's the basic summary of the Doctor, who has been one of the most consistent elements of the show throughout its existence. The TARDIS is the machine used by the Doctor to travel throughout time and space. The word TARDIS stands for time and relative dimension, or dimensions, in space. Within the universe there are multiple different TARDISes, but the Doctor's one has the unique defect of always appearing as a 1960s police box, instead of blending in with the surroundings like a TARDIS is supposed to do. One of the most interesting things about TARDISes is that they are bigger on the inside than the outside, with an almost infinite interior and a customizable console room from which they can be piloted. The Daleks are by far the most well-known and popular villain from Doctor Who. Their first appearance was in the 1963 episode The Dead Planet, with the wider The Dalek serial establishing them as mutants who have retreated into metal shells in the aftermath of nuclear warfare and radiation. They have since become the Doctor's greatest, most recurring foe, almost every incarnation battling them on screen. The Daleks' general design has remained consistent throughout the show's history, and they've often been considered as the creation that saved the show after its rocky beginning. Due to their persistent appearances and iconic design, it's safe to say the Daleks are one of the most recognisable and referenced parts of the entire British media landscape. New Who is one of the major eras of Doctor Who. After a period of inactivity, the 26th of September 2003 saw the announcement of Doctor Who returning to TV with a more modern aesthetic and wider audience appeal. BBC Wales would produce the show, with Russell T Davies as showrunner, and Series 1 aired in 2005. Ever since, the so-called New Who era has continued to air at least one new episode every single year, with Series 15 due to release in 2025, marking the 20th anniversary. New Who is what most people tend to think of these days when they hear about Doctor Who, since its huge early success cemented itself in international media and arguably eclipsed the popularity of the show's original run, introducing a number of doctors, companions and enemies still celebrated to this day. The Sarah Jane Adventures was potentially the biggest and most successful spin-off to come from New Who's runaway success. It wasn't the first attempt at a spin-off of Doctor Who, but it did see the biggest audience due to airing on CBBC for younger audiences. The Earthbound show centred around main character and former Doctor Who companion Sarah Jane Smith, as she teamed up with a ragtag group of schoolchildren to investigate mysteries and defend the planet from a number of existing and original enemies. It was a spin-off notable for its many crossovers with the main Doctor Who show, including 2 stories where the Doctor himself appeared. The Sarah Jane Adventures started in 2007 and ran for 5 series, amassing a total of 53 episodes before being abruptly halted due to the unfortunate death of lead actor Elizabeth Sladen. Due to this, the Sarah Jane Adventures was cancelled in 2011, although its legacy lives on in both Doctor Who media and the fanbase, as it helped to bring in a lot of fans into the show and gave a fresh, cosy perspective of the Doctor Who universe. However, whilst the Sarah Jane Adventures was targeted towards children, Torchwood was the Doctor Who spin-off aimed at a more adult audience. This show would follow popular New Who character Captain Jack as he led a team of edgy alien hunters within the Cardiff Bay area. Unlike Sarah Jane Adventures, Torchwood would become a very controversial show emphasising adult themes like sex, serial killers, suicide, and many other things much less suited for Doctor Who's predominantly young audience, and therefore it saw a lot less crossovers than the other more child-friendly spin-off. Torchwood aired on BBC Three from 2006 to 2011, with 41 episodes across 4 series. Series 3 is often considered the high point, although Series 4 has the exact opposite reputation, with the show ultimately being put on indefinite hiatus before being continued in expanded media from 2017 onwards. Torchwood's sex, drugs and rock and roll approach made it a very polarising spin-off, and many consider it as needlessly immature, although it retains a soft spot in the hearts of many fans, including myself. It is very much a product of its time, although some of it really does go hard. Class is by far the most unsuccessful TV spin-off of the modern era, to the extent a fair amount of fans never even knew it existed to begin with. This spin-off aired for a single season in 2016 and chronicled the exploits of a breakfast club-like group of students at Coal Hill School as they fought monsters and aliens with their anti-hero teacher, Miss Quill. Coal Hill was a location introduced in Doctor Who's first ever episode, but the only real crossover the spin-off saw was the 12th Doctor appearing in its first episode. This lack of connection to Doctor Who is a big reason it was ultimately unsuccessful, with a lot of people suggesting it was a completely different show retrofitted as a Doctor Who spin-off. I personally like Class, I think it has some strong characters and episodes, but it had some clear tonal issues and it also suffered from airing on the then exclusively online BBC Three and a graveyard slot on BBC One. Class was therefore cancelled after just 1 series of 8 episodes, ending on a huge, still unresolved double cliffhanger, but that's a story for another tier. The so-called Classic Who was Doctor Who's original run, starting on the 23rd of November 1963 and ending on the 6th of December 1989. It ran for 26 seasons and featured the first 7 incarnations of the Doctor. Unlike the modern era of the show, Classic Who was made up of serials, which were usually stories made up of anywhere between 1 and 12 episodes, often referred to as parts. Classic Who laid a lot of the foundation the show maintains even to this day, introducing a lot of the persistent concepts, devices, enemies and planets we still see in the modern show. The reason Classic Who was cancelled was due to declining ratings and public interest in the show, along with being personally disliked by a number of higher-ups in the BBC. So fans now separate the different eras of the show due to the large gap between Classic and New Who and the very different episode formats and presentation of the show. The sonic screwdriver is one of the Doctor's most common gadgets, a multi-purpose tool allowing the main character to open doors, interface with technology, and it generally just serves as a bit of a narrative get out of jail free card. It was introduced in Season 5's Fury from the Deep in 1968 and has maintained a near constant presence in the show ever since, adopting a number of different designs throughout its many appearances on both TV and expanded media. Earlier I mentioned the many incarnations of the Doctor, and that's because all of these people are the same entity. since the Doctor and their species can change their face by undergoing a process known as regeneration. This was introduced as a way of writing out first Doctor actor William Hartnell when his health had made it impossible for him to continue, so it has become tradition ever since to have the character regenerate in order to switch actors and keep things going. This changeover usually comes as the dramatic climax of a story, seeing an incarnation die and regenerate to become their successor. The classic Who era used different effects for every regeneration, but New Who has maintained the same general visual effect each time to maintain a sense of consistency. Canon is a difficult word when it comes to Doctor Who, because the show's very nature has made the traditional idea of canon kind of impossible. Properties like Star Trek, Marvel, DC and Star Wars have a set canon, where certain events and stories are deemed as definitive parts of the lore that cannot be disregarded and have to be considered when writing other stories. For example, Star Wars A New Hope is canon. It's a major part of the franchise and it has to be respected and adhered to when creating other Star Wars media. You can't just change the events of that movie without causing a lot of issues. Disney dictates what is and isn't canon in Star Wars, something shown when they changed the rules of canonicity by resetting the expanded universe after buying the franchise. Doctor Who, however, has no such entity responsible for setting the rules of canon. There are a lot of complicated rights regarding different elements of the show, and that means no one can truly define what stories are canon in a traditional sense like Star Wars or Marvel. Usually when people refer to Doctor Who canon, they mean their own headcanon, since there is no definitive canon dictated by the BBC. I personally prioritise events within the show first, as that was its original medium, but it's really up to you as an individual to choose what you yourself consider to be canon. Usually things that are licensed and made by official channels are the closest thing to a real canon, so a lot of the time expanded media productions do hold the same validity as actual main show episodes. There are a lot of conflicting stories throughout Doctor Who, and it's all a bit of a nightmare to try and put it into boxes, so it does get messy and it's easier just to enjoy the ride. To quote AphexCubed, continuity is a measure of whether different stories contradict one another, not a measure of validity. Different stories can still be considered valid even if they contradict each other, like The Haunting of Villa Diodati and The Silver Turk, which both see author Mary Shelley interacting with different incarnations of the Doctor, so they struggle to fit into the same continuity despite both being perfectly valid stories within their mediums. This means that there are different agreed upon continuities, and whilst fans try their best to make everything fit neatly, it's easier to just accept the fact that there's no easy way to organise everything into one single continuity, especially with the canon stuff I just mentioned. Retcons are something that's pretty unavoidable when it comes to a franchise as old and widespread as Doctor Who. The word retcon is short for retroactive continuity, and basically means one story conflicting and overwriting information from another story that came before. This happens on a nearly constant basis with Doctor Who. Things are constantly changing and being retconned, but the lack of a concrete canon again means that you can just pick and choose what you personally accept as fact. The original intent of Doctor Who was to fill a Saturday evening programming gap when the whole family was gathered around the TV, using the characters of Susan, Ian and Barbara to appeal to children and adults alike. It's undeniable that Doctor Who does skew more towards a younger audience as its main demographic, but the show is very much open to adults, with many references, jokes and themes aimed towards that adult audience. The show therefore has an incredibly broad appeal and doesn't just appeal to the children. It is well and truly a family show for all ages. Doctor Who's theme tune is one of the most recognisable British TV themes, mainly due to it remaining the same general piece of music for the show's entire history. The original theme was composed by Delia Derbyshire and Ron Grainer, but it has been altered and adapted by many different composers, most notably Murray Gold in the modern era. Every few years the theme is refreshed for new Doctors or new production teams, so fans often debate which they consider to be the best version of the iconic theme song. Much like the theme song, Doctor Who has had a number of logos being changed and adapted for different eras of the show. These logos usually appear in the title sequence and on merchandise, although sometimes for aesthetic continuity purposes, a logo can be kept for a merch range even after it stopped appearing in the show itself. The BBC is the British Broadcasting Corporation, the main broadcaster in the UK, and the one responsible for commissioning and airing Doctor Who, along with owning the majority of rights. There's not a huge amount to say about it here, but it's definitely important to the history of the show because Doctor Who wouldn't have existed without the BBC. Hiding behind the sofa is a phrase often linked to Doctor Who, stemming from the scariness of the classic show making a lot of children hide behind their sofa for protection as they watched. It has therefore become synonymous with Doctor Who to the extent that even official channels have even adopted it, with an ongoing series of box set extras named Behind the Sofa after this phenomenon. For better or for worse, Doctor Who has become known for its special effects. A lot of the time the show will feature some groundbreaking piece of special effects that actually ends up aging pretty poorly, like the 7th Doctor's title sequence, or one that ages pretty well, like the werewolf from Tooth and Claw, although those are just my personal opinions. However, fans of the show tend to embrace the show's often bad effects and see them as charming aspects of the show's appeal, almost like saying, it's so bad it's good. One of the most common parts of Doctor Who's unintentional charm is how many of the outside sets are actually just quarries, especially in the classic Who era, but also a number of occasions in the modern era too. For obvious budgetary reasons, most alien worlds are filmed in quarries, leading to an ongoing running joke amongst fans that every alien planet is just a Welsh quarry with a bit of set dressing. Doctor Who's missing episodes are one of the most well-known examples of lost media. The BBC had a practice in the 60s and 70s of wiping the tapes of aired TV shows, because they never expected to actually need them again. Reruns weren't a common practice for shows like Doctor Who, VHS tapes and DVDs hadn't even been invented yet, and on-demand TV wasn't even a concept. So the BBC believed it would just be easier to wipe and reuse tapes of shows they never expected to need again. Therefore, as of this video, Doctor Who has a total of 97 episodes missing, a number that actually could have been significantly worse without extensive searches and recoveries over the last 50 years. A large portion of the first and second Doctor's eras remain lost to this day, and only survive in audio form thanks to fans making recordings at the time of airing. TARDIS Datacore is the official name of Doctor Who's main fan wiki, hosted on the site Fandom. This wiki contains a huge amount of Doctor Who knowledge, covering almost all media in an attempt at cataloguing everything there is to know about Doctor Who, and therefore it serves as one of the first stops for icebergs like this or the videos I make. The psychic paper is one of the Doctor's most used gadgets in the modern era. This allows the main character to gain entry anywhere by faking their credentials. It shows whatever the holder wants the viewer to see, or sometimes simply showing exactly what the viewer expects to see. However, there have been cases of characters beating the psychic paper, either through specific training, being too creative, or not being creative at all. Gallifrey is the Doctor's home planet, often cited as being in the constellation of Cerberus, although whether it is in our galaxy or another is a debate arising from the conflicting continuity of the show. Gallifrey is a planet significantly bigger than Earth, with a number of very alien animals and geographical features. Gallifrey has a number of secrets and elements we'll get to in later tiers, but it sits on the top tier due to it being such a significant location for the main character and the modern era of the show. Aside from the native Gallifreyans and Shobogans, the main inhabitants of Gallifrey are the Time Lords. This is either a race or a rank of people who have extensive access to time travel and often attempt to observe and chronicle the many histories of the universe. They were first seen in the 1969 story The War Games and appeared a number of times in the Classic Who era, before having a much lesser role in New Who due to the Last Great Time War. The Last Great Time War is the cataclysmic event happening between the end of Classic Who and the beginning of New Who. This conflict took place between the Time Lords and the Daleks, resulting in the destruction of Gallifrey and the near extinction of both the Daleks and the Time Lords, along with it being responsible for the regenerations of both the 8th Doctor and the War Doctor. The Last Great Time War is essentially incomprehensible for lesser species like our own, since it took place across all of time and space, along with different dimensions and planes of existence. It's all a bit chaotic. As the name implies, this wasn't the first such time war, but the conclusive nature of the conflict definitely made it the last. Catchphrases form a strong core of Doctor Who, especially in the modern era, with Doctors often gaining their own catchphrases such as the 10th Doctor's Alonzi and the 11th Doctor's Geronimo. Even villains are no strangers to catchphrases, with the Daleks' iconic exterminate and the modern show's Cybermen saying delete. Due to the TARDIS's incredible size, it has been common for characters to react with the words, "It's bigger on the inside." This phrase has even been joked about within the show itself, along with becoming a part of wider pop culture, people comparing things to the TARDIS when they're bigger on the inside. A common fixture of the show is the mystery of the Doctor's real name, with the titular question of, Doctor Who. As in this video, the Doctor's real name has never been outright stated within the show. There have been many jokes about this, including playful reveals of their true name, but as it stands, the question Doctor Who remains as strong as ever. Bow ties have become a bit synonymous with Doctor Who thanks to the 2nd and 11th Doctors, particularly the 11th, who had a running gag of insisting bow ties are cool. Due to the popularity of both the 11th Doctor and his era of the show, there have even been reports of the sales of bow ties in the UK increasing by as much as 10% alongside the 11th Doctor's popularity. Doesn't do wood refers to the sonic screwdriver's famous inability to operate on wood or anything constructed from that material. It has become a long-running joke both within the fiction of the show itself and the fanbase as a whole, with many moments referencing how the device just struggles with wood. Doctor Who magazine is a magazine dedicated entirely to Doctor Who, obviously, having run for over 40 years. It tends to include exclusive interviews with cast and crew, behind the scenes content, entire comic stories, retrospective articles, and all sorts of features about Doctor Who. Children in Need is a British charity run by the BBC themselves, raising money for disadvantaged children in the UK. Since 1980, the BBC has broadcast a telethon special every year in November, with presenters, musical acts and sketches involving notable celebrities and TV shows. Doctor Who has been a staple of Children in Need, with many minisodes and sketches I'll talk more specifically about later on in the Iceberg. Much like Children in Need, Comic Relief is a British charity that runs yearly telethon events on BBC One to raise money. Doctor Who has a long-standing relationship with these events, often airing exclusive skits and sketches within the programming block. These are either in-universe mini-episodes or comedic crossover events using elements and characters from the show in an out-of-universe capacity. Multi-Doctor stories are a cornerstone of Doctor Who, using its time travel nature to have different incarnations of the Doctor share the screen at the same time. There have been a number of these stories in the show and even more in expanded media, leading them to become a celebrated part of the franchise. Multi-Doctor stories can range from dedicated episodes with a Doctor returning in full capacity to simple brief cameos. Ever since the show was brought back in 2005, there have been regular Christmas specials bridging the gap between series. This became a tradition between 2005 and 2017, before the special slot was moved to New Year's Day for a number of years, although it has since returned to Christmas Day. These episodes tend to be the most watched episodes of the modern show due to their accessibility, light tone, and occasional celebrity guests. Doctor Who having two distinct eras means that fans like to separate them as seasons and series. Usually a Doctor Who fan would refer to a season when talking about Classic Who and a series when it's New Who. This means season 11, for example, means the final 3rd Doctor season, while series 11 refers to the 13th Doctor's first series. Season 1 to 26 is Classic Who and series 1 to 13 is New Who. Although that being said, Series 14 of New Who is officially called Season 1, which is very confusing and already a big debate in the fanbase. The Doctor Who Annual is a long-running piece of written media released almost every year since 1965. These tend to be aimed towards the younger demographic and therefore feature things like comics, puzzles, quizzes, and behind-the-scenes information. There have been some gaps like 1986 to 1992 and 1996 to 2006, but it by and large remains a consistent piece of Doctor Who media. Character Options is the company that currently holds the rights to Doctor Who action figures and has done so since 2005. They're responsible for the majority of current Doctor Who merch, although recent years have seen some fan discontent at the lack of content for the current series and a perceived weak figure quality. Lego is of course one of the most popular toy formats, although it's notable for how little it has actually worked with Doctor Who, especially due to the success it has had with other properties like Star Wars and Harry Potter. The only traditional Doctor Who Lego set came courtesy of the LEGO Ideas range in 2015, when a fan-submitted set was produced. To this day, that remains the only conventional Doctor Who Lego set, although two were made to tie into the next entry, LEGO Dimensions. LEGO Dimensions is a hugely popular Toys to Life game released in 2015. It takes the traditional Traveller's Tales Lego game format and opens it up to multiple different franchises in a multiverse setting. Doctor Who has a core focus in the game, as well as Doctor appearing in cutscenes even without needing to buy the Doctor Who character packs to unlock playable levels. Therefore, many people consider this to be the best Doctor Who game, and it has led to persistent requests for a dedicated LEGO Doctor Who game to be made. r/Doctor Who is the main Doctor Who subreddit, allowing posts discussing the show, showcasing fan art, clips from the official YouTube channel, and self-promotion. It's not the only Doctor Who subreddit, but it is the biggest and most used, and it's kind of how I began to start my channel. The Doctor Who YouTube channel is the official YouTube channel for the show, regularly uploading clips from past episodes, compilations, exclusive behind-the-scenes videos, along with trailers and other promotional material. The most popular and parodied aspect of the Doctor Who YouTube channel is the end card on every video, which usually features the incumbent Doctor requesting for the viewer to like and subscribe, just like you should with this video. This mainly became a meme during the 12th Doctor era, and it continues to be an inside joke to this day.
Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Doctor Who YouTube channel.
If you're British or grew up in Britain, then you'll probably be familiar with Mr. Men and Little Miss, the series of children's books by Roger Hargreaves which explores the exploits of characters such as Mr. Tickle, Mr. Nosy, Little Miss Bossy, and Mr. Lazy, amongst many others. Mr. Men is notable to Doctor Who because of Doctor Men, a series of crossover books released in 2017 and 2018, combining the format of the Mr. Men books with the many incarnations of the Doctor. Lastly, for this first tier of the iceberg, we have Google Doodles. These are a regular fixture of the Google search homepage, creating a unique look for the site and also allowing visitors to play little games or complete puzzles as part of a clickable Easter egg. For Doctor Who's 50th anniversary in 2013, there was an official Google Doodle which allowed you to access a short isometric game where you play as the Doctor collecting the letters of the word Google across a number of levels featuring iconic Doctor Who enemies. Upon death, you would regenerate into the next incarnation until you ran out of Doctors. As of this video, the game is still fully accessible and playable, and I highly recommend giving it a go. So, that's it for the first tier of the Doctor Who iceberg. As you can see, we're still in the sky. We haven't even caught a glimpse of the actual iceberg itself yet. I'm incredibly excited to continue this series, and I hope that this introduction to the iceberg was interesting or informative, whether you're a long-term Doctor Who fan who knows everything, or a fresh face eager to learn. Most of what I've covered today is common knowledge, considering it's the very first tier, but things will start to get more complex and obscure as we go on, so again, please give this video a like if you want to see the deeper layers. I'm not sure when I'll have tier 2 out for you, but hopefully it shouldn't take too long for me to make, and I would once again really like to thank AphexCubed for letting me use their iceberg, and you can view it for yourself over at icebergcharts.com. Thank you all very much for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye. And I'd just like to quickly thank my Bantam level patrons, Fallon Cortez and Nathan Gibson, my Diamond level patron, Glenna Clark, my Platinum level patrons, Matthew Burns and Maximilian Foreman, and all my Gold level patrons, Boots, Daniel Shillito, Franzorn aka Alarm Vortex, Leigh Marie Farrell, Robert Hock, Spangy Boy, and Tom Azar. Thank you so much for your support.